Welcome to another edition of The Plane Guys. I'm Jeffrey Thomas, and I'm delighted to say, joined by my co-host, Richard Godfrey in Germany. Good morning, Richard.
And good afternoon, Jeffrey.
Yeah, now today we're going to look at the tragic shootdown of KE007, that's Korean Airlines, and Malaysian Airlines MH17. So, Richard, perhaps we can kick off and look at KE007, and perhaps you can give us an overview of what happened.
Yeah, Korean Airlines flight KE007 crashed on the 1st of September 1983. It crashed at 1826 UTC, which was in the middle of the night local time at 3:26 in the morning. The aircraft was a Boeing 747-200 on a scheduled flight from New York to Seoul in Korea, and it had a stopover in Anchorage, Alaska. And unfortunately, all 269 passengers and crew on board were killed.
So perhaps you can describe the sequence of events that led up to that tragic crash.
Yeah, when the plane left Anchorage, Alaska, uh, according to the flight plan, should have taken a route along flight route R20 from a Vortac navigation point at Bethel. And it should have followed a number of waypoints designed to keep the aircraft out of Russian airspace. And it was supposed to do step climbs along the route from flight level 310 and another one to flight level 330 at certain waypoints. And we're showing a screenshot from Sky Vector of the reconstructed flight plan using the original waypoints in that flight plan. Now, the aircraft turned onto a heading of 245 degrees magnetic soon after takeoff and remained on that course for the whole flight. The deviation resulted in a progressively greater lateral displacement to the right from the planned flight route, and ultimately resulted in penetration of the adjacent high seas airspace in the flight information regions operated by the Union of the Soviet Socialist Republic, the USSR, back in those days. The flight actually incurred the airspace over Kamchatka Peninsula and the Sakhalin Island and the surrounding territorial waters belonging to the USSR. The Soviet aircraft made two attempts to intercept KE007 and eventually shot it down 37 kilometers west of a town called Sakhalinsk, which is the capital of Sakhalin Island. And the plane crashed into the Okhotsk Sea just off Sakhalin Island.
So, what were the results of the initial investigation, Richard?
They were actually very difficult because the Russians found the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder, but they kept them to themselves. They found them already in 1983. They eventually handed it over to the ICAO 10 years later in January 1993. And the flight data recorder confirmed that KE007 turned onto this magnetic heading of 245, which it reached 3 minutes after takeoff from Anchorage. It also confirmed that that magnetic heading was maintained right through until the attack by the Soviet fighter jet. Uh, and the maintenance of a constant magnetic heading rather than switching to the inertial navigation system and the waypoints that were planned for the flight route um, showed up almost immediately. By the time the aircraft got to the Bethel Vortac, it was already slightly off the flight route. And the inertial navigation system uh, picks up a flight route as long as it's within 7.5 nautical miles. And maybe the inertial navigation system was switched, but too late to capture the desired track, or it wasn't switched and it was left in heading mode, and hence it just continued on this 245-degree magnetic heading for
Mhm.
the whole flight. We're showing a screenshot of the ICAO flight plan from back then. Um, and it gets a bit more complicated because there was a United States intelligence aircraft, an RC-135, in the proximity of KE007, and the Russians actually confused whether KE007 might have been a second RC-135 aircraft doing intelligence. So they, as I say, they sent up fighter jets, but and they didn't seem to check that there were some major differences. For example, a Boeing 747 has got a set of windows all along the aircraft, and they would be possibly lit up. Um, and an RC-135 doesn't have a set of windows for passengers. So it's a little bit suspicious that the Russians took the decision to shoot down the aircraft, and they could, in my view, well have known it was a passenger aircraft and not a US military intelligence aircraft.
Yeah, indeed. So, what were the lessons learnt and what were the changes made after this one?
Yeah, the ICO brought in a whole set of rules about intercepting an unresponsive aircraft which is diverting from its flight plan. And we've went through this list in the case of MH370, which was also an unresponsive aircraft diverting from a flight plan. And the manual clearly says what an aircraft intercepting is supposed to do. Should approach from behind, keep a safe distance, only get close enough to make a positive ID. Every aircraft has got its registration number, and commercial aircraft will have identification, which airline they belong to. Um, and then you're supposed to move in front of the aircraft, rock your wings if it's daytime, or flash your navigation lights or afterburners if it's nighttime. And that indicates follow me. And then you're supposed to lead the aircraft to an airport where you force it to land. What it doesn't say is you should shoot it down.
Indeed. Yeah, there's a whole series of signals, isn't there? Rocking wings and dropping flares and whatnot.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that procedure came in as a result of this incident, and there was obviously a huge outcry at the time and a huge debate about how you should intercept an aircraft that is just flying, uh, deviating from its flight route and incurring airspace, which is, of course, in some cases very sensitive. There's Russian and American facilities military facilities that should not be overflown. And it is actually well known by pilots that some areas should not be overflown. But
Mm.
this
In fact,
tragedy happened.
there's lots of airspace in China that's closed to commercial traffic too.
Yes, indeed. And you have to be very careful to follow the flight routes according to the flight plan when you're crossing China. And that can actually cause some deviations from the direct, straight line path from
Mm.
A to B.
Mm.
So it costs you more fuel, but of course you keep to the rules.
You do. So let's move on and let's move forward in time to MH17, I should say. Perhaps you can give us an overview of what happened with MH17.
Yeah, well, that crashed on the 17th of July 2014 at 13:20 UTC or 16:20 in the afternoon local time over Ukraine airspace. The aircraft was exactly the same as MH370, a Boeing 777 2H6ER, and this one was on a scheduled flight from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur, and all 298 passengers and crew on board were killed.
Now, perhaps you can go through the sequence of events that led to this terrible tragedy.
Yeah, this is a little bit more complicated than the Korean one. We're showing a screenshot of the reconstructed flight plan using the original waypoints. Now, according to the flight plan for MH17, it should continue at the flight level it was on until it got to a waypoint called Pekit, Pekit, which is in the flight information region over Ukraine and at the boundary between the Kiev flight region and the Dnipropetrovsk flight region. Sorry, I can't pronounce that. And at waypoint Pekit, it was supposed to climb to flight level 350 on an airway L980 for the remaining part of the flight over the Ukraine. And we're showing another screenshot of the reconstructed flight plan and the crash location. Now, there were NOTAMs in force restricting commercial air traffic. They should keep to flight levels above flight level 260 from waypoint Tagan. And then at waypoint Ganra, they should be above flight level 320, which was the case in MH17's situation. And the MH17 was at flight level 330, and as I mentioned, was supposed to move to 350 at waypoint Pekit, but it was for some reason not willing to do that. There was an interesting exchange between the ATC and MH17, and I have the transcript here, and we're showing it on the screen. So ATC says Malaysian 17, Dnipro radar, hello, identified, advise, able to climb flight level 350. MH17 responded, Malaysian 17, negative, maintain 330. And ATC responds, Malaysian 17, roger. So nobody gives a reason and no reason is asked, and the flight just continued at 330. And as I say, that was above the minimum of 320, but unfortunately it wasn't high enough to avoid a missile attack.
He probably couldn't climb because he's probably still too heavy to do so.
Yep, too heavy, or there was a forecast of turbulence at the higher level.
Mm,
We can only guess.
sure, absolutely. So, what were the results of the investigation? Because it was mired in politics, of course.
Yeah. The final report by the Dutch Safety Board, 279 pages long, and appendices with another 176 pages, was published in October 2015. We're showing a screenshot of that announcement in October, and the Dutch Safety Board show also in that picture the Buck missile remains that they found at the site. Um, the Dutch actually spent a total of 199 million euros, which is 217 million US dollars, on the investigation and on the subsequent criminal proceedings. The flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder were recovered, and all of the wreckage from the site, from several sites in the Ukraine, was recovered and completely rebuilt in a hangar in Holland. Uh, as I say, the Russian Buck missile was found and identified. The mobile rocket launcher used was identified, and its movements that day were tracked, including the location of the firing of the missile. So we got quite a lot of information that came out of the investigation.
That was an outstanding piece of investigation. And the tracking of the mobile rocket launcher, a lot of that was done on social media, people taking pictures of it, trundling through their villages and whatnot.
Yeah,
I
and a company called Bellingcat put it all together and did a very interesting report with those videos from different individuals and other information that they could get from radar or from this investigation report.
mm. So the lessons, Richard, what did we learn from this terrible, terrible tragedy?
Well, there were actually 160 flights that day crossing the same flight information region. And there were flights by many different operators, including Air India, Emirates, Etihad, Lufthansa, Qatar Airways, Singapore Airlines, Swiss, Thai, and Virgin Atlantic. As you previously pointed out in another episode, Jeffrey, some airlines like Qantas and British Airways had long decided not to overfly. And the immediate consequence after the shooting down of MH17 was that all airlines stopped overflying Ukraine.
Hmm.
But after a certain time, certain airlines started again to fly over Ukraine. And then in February 2022, when Russia launched its full scale invasion of Ukraine, the airspace was closed again to all commercial traffic. And as of today, the Ukrainian airspace remains closed to commercial aviation wanting to overfly the Ukraine because of the ongoing military conflict and safety concerns.
Oh, yes. I'm showing this on the screen now. We have the flight radar tracking of that Malaysian MH17, and just to the north of it is a Singapore Airlines 777 en route from Copenhagen to Singapore. It crossed just behind it, and very close to it when it was shot down.
And
Yeah, that
I
was
actually ran whisper through the area at the time, and I could pick up MH17 and I could pick up the Singapore airline and one or two other commercial aircraft. And you could also pick up whatever military aircraft were flying around at the time. So um, it's there's a lot more information out there, I think, than is even included in the 276-page report.
Mm. Yes, I'm sure. I'm sure there is. And but what a ghastly, ghastly tragedy that was. And there are people who know. Everybody seems to, particularly in Australia. I think there was about 36 Australians that were killed, or people holding Australian passports or dual passports. And so, there's people who know people who lost people, kind of thing, and it really did affect a lot of
Yeah.
communities around the world.
The same here in Europe. A lot of people from Holland, quite a number from Belgium, and you know, you it's not difficult to find people who know people who were affected.
Mm, a terrible, terrible tragedy. Yeah, but of course now, if there's any conflict whatsoever, airlines are all avoiding any conflict zone whatsoever. And so there's been some quite interesting rerouting of aircraft to avoid hotspots. So hopefully we've learnt something from this terrible tragedy, and
Yeah.
hopefully it won't get repeated.
It gets a bit difficult at times. For example, with the heightened tensions in the Middle East and Israel and Lebanon and Hamas and the Houthi rebels in Yemen and then Iran getting uptight. It was very difficult to find a flight route that didn't go over
Mm,
any airspace where there was a
yep.
conflict. And for airlines based in the Middle East, like Etihad and Emirates and Qatar, or those airlines that flew over the Middle East from Europe to Asia to Australia, it can get very difficult doing the risk assessments and rerouting your aircraft, and sometimes it costs them huge diversions, a lot more fuel, and adds quite a lot more time. But you better safe than sorry.
Well, I know that one airline, Finnair, flying from Helsinki to Tokyo, they won't fly over Russia, and therefore it adds about 2.5 to 3 hours to the flight time. So it's an enormous penalty in fuel that the airlines have got to wear one way or another. And of course, in the end, passengers as well, increased airfares.
Yeah.
So so we're going to take questions tomorrow, Richard. Are we not on this? I'm sure a lot of people are going to have some questions
Yeah.
on this particular
And
episode.
we had a question already yesterday from one viewer when you were talking with Blaine was asking about was this shot down? Was MH370 shot down? Well, we don't believe MH370 was shot down, but when you hear Korean 007 or MH17 were shot down, then it's a fair enough question to ask about MH370. But yeah, so we need to be careful what aircraft were shot down and what aren't. And we'd love to hear your comments and your questions.
Mm. So, viewers, thank you very much indeed for tuning in today. Please subscribe to us, please like us, and please do leave those questions and those comments. We really appreciate your support. Thank you very much indeed for this rundown, Richard, and all the research you've done into it. And viewers, we will see you all tomorrow. Thank you, Richard.
You're welcome.